Okay, so let's start. Dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm very happy to welcome all of you on our first conference about social disorder and EU and COVID. I would like to invite President of Center for Geostrategic Studies, Ms. Dragana Trifkovic, and President of Swiss Center for Global Trends, Mr. Stephan Breu, to introduce themselves, to say something about this conference. And after that, I would like also to invite all participants shortly to introduce themselves and that we can start with the conference. Thank you for understanding. So, Dragana, please, you're the only lady here. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear participants of the conference. My name is Dragana Trifkovic. I'm the General Director of the Center for Geostrategic Studies from Serbia. To begin, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Swiss Center for Global Trends and the Center for Geostrategic Studies of Serbia for participating in our first online conference. The Swiss Center for Global Trends and the Center for Geostrategic Studies of Serbia have recently signed a cooperation agreement. The European Platform for Dialogue and Cooperation, in which our conference is being held today, is at the same time the first joint project of partner organizations from Switzerland and Serbia. The basic idea behind our joint action: Switzerland and Serbia are European countries. They are not members of the EU and NATO. Switzerland is home to many international institutions. As the successor of Yugoslavia and non-aligned movement, Serbia has the ability to take an independent position in international relations. That is why the idea of joint cooperation and the organization of an independent European platform for dialogue and cooperation was born, in which we plan to hold conferences on many topics. We believe that an open dialogue is more than necessary for the European society in times of geopolitical changes in order to find the best solution through discussion and cooperation, and to provide answers to many questions concerning the future of European countries. Our first conference is focused on following topics: COVID-19 in the EU. So the pandemic of coronavirus and all the events arising from it are very active in all spheres of human life, in global processes. We will be honored to hear our participants, and that we will as well be very glad to continue to cooperate with you in future conferences. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dragana. I would like now to invite His Eminence, one of the very leading person from Switzerland, Dr. Stephan Breu, please, President of Center for Global Trends. Can you go ahead?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Zoran, for this very nice introduction. As Zoran has already mentioned, I'm president of the Swiss Center for Global Trends and president of the Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi University in Miami. And I'm also very happy to welcome you to the first conference of the European Platform for Dialogue and Cooperation. The platform has been initiated by the Center for Geostrategic Studies in Belgrade and is supported by our Swiss Center for Global Trends. As independent international think tanks, we hope to add substantially and sustainably to ongoing discussions worldwide by combining our capabilities and resources. Especially in times like we experience today, it is absolutely necessary to remind us that dialogue and cooperation are essential for a peaceful and sustainable future of our continent, Europe. Let us also remember that dialogue is a conversational exchange between two or more people and not just monologues held at the same time and place. For a just dialogue, we have to break the modern concept of bubbles to enter in a respectful and open discussion where we do not have to agree with the other parties, but at least should try to understand their point of view without taking a position as moral agent. More often, we should refer to a very old quote of Thomas Aquinas: "We must love them both, those whose opinions we share and those whose opinions we reject, for both have labored into the search for truth and both have helped us in finding it." Even if such respectful confrontation is not popular in the modern Western society anymore. Leaving the imminent danger of a war in Europe, let us move towards international humanitarian law. Beside all geostrategic developments, we have another aspect that we should not forget about. The COVID-19 pandemic has an enormous impact on our societies worldwide through governments trying to control a virus through countermeasurements. Such measurements have devastating impacts on economics, social groups, health security, and especially on the vulnerable children. A lot of these measurements are close to violation of fundamental rights, like children's right to education or the individual right to freedom and security. Together, we are gathered here to discuss COVID-19 in the European Union, the degradation of social cohesion and stability, as a first contribution of our platform to the ongoing discourse in Europe. As an independent think tank, we are proud to be able to have such proven professionals as speakers that will surely broaden our understanding of this topic today. Let me express my gratitude to our speakers and give the word back to the moderator of our discussion, Mr. Zoran Vitorovic, PhD.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephan. I'm very happy now to invite our next speaker, excellent expert in many things, our dear friend, Dr. Elmar Kuhn from European Academy of Science and Arts. And let's hear what Dr. Kuhn has to say about this social distortion in Europe after COVID-19. Please, dear colleague, go ahead.
Thanks very much. First, let me thank very much for the invitation. I really do believe that such a platform is missing in Europe. We see such a lot of misunderstandings of the will not to understand now, not only the capability not to understand, but the misunderstanding is the will. And what we see at the moment is the Ukraine, with the crisis between United States and Russia, is nothing less than a deep distrust and misunderstanding of what the other wants to do and wants to be. I think what we need is more discussion, more trust, and the only way to find this is to get better involved in debates, better involved in meetings, better involved in argumentations. And I thank Stephan Breu for his mentioning of St. Thomas Aquinas, because what he told us is that we have to see a thesis and a synthesis by the contra-arguments. And without getting to the synthesis, there will be only one will and one vote, and all others should be silent. We need the debate. We need to discuss with argumentations and with theses and antitheses. If we don't do so, there will never be a synthesis which can be valid for the whole population. It only will be the will of one person and no chance for the others to be heard. So let's try to find this way of getting syntheses and bringing them to knowledge to the interested people in the academic world. The question of the degradation of social cohesion and stability by COVID-19 is obviously a big theme. And what we see at the moment is the danger that also the complete European Union will be targeted and maybe will be demolished before Switzerland or Serbia can enter. So what is the problem? I believe that no threats are without chances. And I believe that COVID-19, if we look deeper, is a game changer for education in Europe and worldwide. But first, what are the threats and what is happening in our societies? I think what we have been facing in the last 2 COVID years is an enormous individualization of the society, a risky lack of solidarity, the division of society and families within, and our politics and politicians lose the consent of society, and at the same time right-wing groups appear in public unchallenged. We are underway to a path of egoism and hedonistic individuality, and the fear of COVID ended active social behavior and social helping contacts. And who are the victims? First of all, our young generation is targeted. The loss of chances, no real life social interaction. Instead of live meetings, virtual contacts. That's the reality of the 2 years of COVID. And this dangerous development, which started before COVID, we have seen also by all the social medias. But what happened with COVID is that COVID worked like an accelerant to the transfer of social life into the cloud, far away from personal meetings and personal acceptance. Our universities and the high school students learn to work with the internet possibilities. Live exchange turned to happen primarily in bubbles, that means in COVID clean entities. Instead of public discussions, in reality, we have seen the transfer of debates into the cloud by Zoom conferences. This created a loss of social interaction in the schools and universities, and the loss of argumentations with heart and mimic. And the main question today is the educational sector in Europe capable of transferring educational content to interactive internet sessions? And will our future be a combination of interactive and live session? This would cause social interaction in small groups and only very seldom in big auditoriums. But are such big auditoriums to meet, are they essential for the social cohesion and the exchange of argumentations? Yes, they are. Because as human beings, it is, according to Aristotle, the zoon politikon which we are. We need the experience of the wide range of reactions by other people. But in reality, how often such a lively exchange happened in the real educational life? The main discussion, also before COVID, took place in smaller groups of seminaries and learning rounds. So what we have been missing? I believe the major issue was the impossibility to meet other people and to discuss matters after the educational events and auditorium maximum meetings in the university. This missing of social interaction minimized the understanding of social cohesion and altruism. Instead of this, we have seen growing depression and pure individualism. Till, as Jean-Paul Sartre understood very clearly in his scripts, growing self-destruction and suicide of young people in COVID times. Let's think out of the box. When we investigate development countries worldwide, we understand that all our COVID threats may turn into chances for future. As Secretary General of Christians in Need.eu, I'm involved in education programs in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And what we see is not only COVID. Long before COVID, there has been a lack of higher education possibilities. Poor people had no chance to get higher education, which would enable them to get out of the day worker's life into an own business or getting higher qualified jobs. So no education at the same time means no chance for an independent life. In these social and strategic situations where no access to higher education is possible, the chance of internet-based education is enormous. A mobile phone you will find in everybody's pocket. If you can bring studies and high school contents, including discussions and exams, into net-based programs, we will be able to empower regions where no education possibilities are able for poor populations. In our Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi Christian University, based in Florida, we try to establish such programs of education for marginalized groups in our world. One program is now offering a master degree on Christian humanities for multiplicators. We have students also from the mountain region in the Sud department of Haiti, where for poor people, no higher education possibilities are available. Well, let's sum up. COVID-19 is a real threat for the degradation of social cohesion in Europe. But if we learn to adapt our educational facilities to more internet exchange and distance learning, this could be a real accelerator also for the higher educational chances in development countries worldwide. And in Europe, we have the competence and the money to establish new ways of learning. And the whole world could get a chance for self-empowerment of the young generation with our learning techniques. And two, a mixed higher education program in Europe with interactive groups and small live discussions would be helpful for our students in pandemic times too. And afterwards, this way of education could intensify the European-wide transfer of learning groups to be connected at the same time with real classes in groups and cooperate on the other side by cloud-based communications with other groups in whole Europe. This will bring the whole Bologna system to a new and enlarged understanding. And it would deepen the experience of a united Europe rather than the regress towards intolerant nationalistic politics. It's my hope that this COVID-19 disaster wakens up our inventive spirit and brings it to new chances for our young generation and for the young generation in Africa and Asia. At the end, with better educated generations, democracy could grow up and religious and cultural differences could be minimized. Therefore, I believe in the cooperation of the religious leaders worldwide. Politics and religion are no enemies. They are damned to deeper cooperation if our future should turn from threats if our future should turn from threats into chances. That's one of the main teachings the COVID-19 pandemic brought into our minds. It's my belief that the chances of such situations are much more important than the threats and disadvantages. So let's look forward. Education will beat individualism, and hedonism will be beaten by the awakening of social cohesion in our common Europe, enriched by religious and cultural varieties. We need these varieties. We are not Catholic or Orthodox or Lithuanian or Islamic or whatever. We are all together. And only speaking, learning, and teaching together will bring this continent to a new rise up. And believe me, our world between Russia, America, and China needs a well-educated Europe. Europe capable of its own possibilities and willing to give its contribution to a peaceful Europe. Therefore, we are working. Please, let's join. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kuhn. It was very inspirative, and I can just add before I give the floor to other panelists, and then we can come to the discussion. I can just add, I agree with you because I deeply believe in one philosophy that there is no difference between ethnicity, religion group, or national group. There are only one and small difference, and this is temperament and character of one individual person. That is the universal law. That is, let's say, God's rule, and we should accept this. So, thank you very much for very inspirative, and I think we will have a lot to discuss after this conference. Anyhow, next panelist is Arnaud Devaley, international human rights lawyer, and dear Arnaud, please take the floor. And we are very happy that you are this evening with us.
Well, thank you very much. First, want to thank the organizers, and I'm very honored to be part of this inaugural conference. And I hope this will be only the first of many, as the challenges laying ahead of us are overwhelmingly grave and will require steady implication and discipline for the forces in presence are humongously challenging. So I decided to title my introduction today what I will call the Great Polarity Inversion. In a nutshell, although we shall not in as much inquire about the theosophical nature of what COVID-19 means, we will examine how the rollout of the operation started in March 2020 managed to surf on a wave of mass hypnosis, which in turn allowed for the destruction of constitutional orders across most of European continent, save, I would say save, for those member states which retained the antibodies against which the emerging dystopia might still find a contention. And in that respect, I'm afraid to say that unlike the previous speaker, I'm afraid that we are heading toward a division of the continent, and a division which may last at the very least a few decades, maybe more, unless a self-awareness process takes place. Let us start by what Dr. Kuhn actually mentioned, which it turns out, synchronicity oblige, I actually co-opted myself, which is COVID-19 as the great accelerator. It is a great accelerator. It is an accelerator of a process which, in my opinion, started about half a century ago, at least in thus far as the western part of Europe is concerned, and the west coast of the United States as a vanguard laboratory of social engineering. During that period, the West, as it were, philosophically, underwent a radical transformation which set out to deconstruct every pillar of traditional life which Western society on the whole had known for millennia. This project was carried out through the systematic application of social engineering measures originally conceived by an outfit known as the School of Frankfurt. This current of thought was only accelerated by then the French theory, such as Foucault and Derrida and Althusser. These individuals additionally benefited from support from intelligence agencies, as they slowly but surely were the first to set out and conquer the realm of academia. Throughout the next 50 years, this assault on what had been anthropological constants laid the ground for a complete eradication of what had made the Western man resilient in the face of threats and challenges to his worldview. The assault was even made more brutal owing to the short amount of time during which this operation occurred. The combined rise of aggressive feminism, mass immigration owing to profit motives, institutional abortion process and policies, mass divorces, and a certain self-hatred for one's own identity was on top of it fueled by the corporate endorsement of such ideologies, which the traditional left, once championing workers' rights, promptly embraced as substitutes for its own forsaking of the working class. On a spiritual level, the reform of Vatican II paved the way for the advent of the secular human rights ideologies, an ideology which the last 20 years has been used as a justification for neo-imperial policies under the cloak of democracy. This inversion of terms and this departure from tradition allowed for subversive elements to penetrate the ecclesiastical institutions and turn them into nothing more than compliant appendixes of those advocating for a liquid society, a spiritual wasteland, whereas man has no history as well as no destiny. This atomization process was further characterized by a period of frantic consumerism. The market became the ultimate arbiter of the agora. And in this context, mercantile concerns slowly replaced the state's sacred duty to preserve the interest of its constituencies. Meritocracy was abandoned, sycophancy was promoted, so-called experts invested the realms of public discourse, charlatanism and false idols became the new high priest of corporate interest. This descent into civilizational oblivion was greatly facilitated by the concentration of media, but in a few hands. The media achieved to manipulate public perception of reality at the expense of sound empiricism. The verticality of old made room for the equivalency of opinions, whereupon everyone was henceforth deemed to be an authority on all topics in the name of tolerance and free speech. All of the above made it easy then to subjugate the remnants of a constitutional order in the name of science. But then a simultaneously opposite process started, which I call the great polarity inversion. There were those who would not conform. Once dissipated the lure and sirens of unabated freedom through abundance, there arose those having lived in the former totalitarian realm of the communist bloc, who came to question the ideology of the end of history. In those lands, Christianity had played a significant role in keeping the populations hopeful for the day which would see the tyrannical yoke of the nomenclatura shatter under the weight of its own internal Promethean contradictions. Alexander Solzhenitsyn had long embodied these longings when, in 1978, he had already warned the world that grass, like the long story short, was not necessarily greener on the other side of the fence. In Poland, the former leader of the Solidarity movement himself came to express his own disillusion with Western Gnostic thought of what was meant by progressivism. He recalled the old injunctions of his youth when the Western establishment castigated him for deviationist thoughts about same-sex marriages and or the disastrous civilizational effect of the migrant onslaught in Europe. This emerging polarity inversion can also be witnessed as the Brussels Politburo attempts to take control over Polish courts or impose sanctions against Hungary for its having passed legislation preventing open society organizations to engage in subversive activity in that country. In the Russian Federation, the constitutional referendum of August 2020 re-established the primacy of Russian law over international legislation, whose aims are to call into question the cultural and spiritual foundation of orthodoxy. Clearly, in those countries, the defense mechanism needed to preserve society against the leviathan of dissolution are still functioning, and the Moloch of Davos is in turn brought to show its true face. For in order to succeed with its final push for total control over the souls and bodies of those living under its sway, does not suffer the very existence of an alternative. The emergence of this renewed dichotomy will over time reaffirm the validity of age-old principles of rooted interdependence and rejection of materialism as an end unto itself. Even if the false god of Davos initially succeed in coercing its population to comply in becoming tenants of what Slobodan Despot has referred to as an electronic prison, this attempt has already lost its momentum, and the intuitive powers of the masses is slowly reasserting itself, owing to the very tools upon which this Babylonian order has relied on for so long. To conclude, in its attempt to control the financial system, remain in charge of the levers of production, the architect of the so-called Great Reset have been forced to move forward the COVID-19 narrative earlier than what had been initially envisioned. In doing so, the Davos cabal crowd rarely underestimated the need to wait until the time was right to achieve corrupting the traditional principle shared by population who once lived under the communist dystopia, as had been done successfully over the last 50 years in the former democratic West. This in turn revealed ab initio the fundamentally malign nature lying behind the motives of the 2030 agenda, and sets the stage for a renewed ideological confrontation, which over time will expose the internal contradiction of a project which at its core rejects all transcendence in the name of a Promethean aspiration which itself is doomed to fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnaud. This was really very, very interesting and inspirative, and I'm sure in many things contradictory to the previous speakers. Anyhow, I would like to ask all of you to unmute your microphones, and let's hear the next two speakers, and then we can go on short discussion. Our next speaker is our dear academic from Germany, Professor Dr. Menno Aden, and I would like to give the floor to Dr. Aden. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much that you give me the floor. I have prepared a small paper which really bases on a lecture which I gave some years ago in Russia. The topic is, what is holding society together? Point of departure. Besides the medical defects of COVID-19, which are not to be discussed here, the pandemic has social and political effects on almost every versus of life. My reflections want to bring out that strong community is a prerequisite of a meaningful human life, and that the dissolution of social bonds is actually the greatest evil that can affect men. Common ground, common good and individual goods. Individuals have certain interests which serve themselves and which they believe they need. These individual goods may also be looked upon as common goods. What is to be done? People have always lived in society. The Robinson example, the novel character who is cast away alone on an island and settled there, is one of the most horrible imaginings of novelists ever had. Robinson never existed. and if he existed, he was definitely one of the most unhappy persons on earth. Human society, as a system in which people aligned with interests, has existed as long as there have been people. Zoon Politikern has already been mentioned. It is therefore absurd to regard self-interest and the common good as opposites. Since the pursuit of one's own interests only ever takes place in human society, self-interest only presents itself as part of the common interests of the society. The individual desires health, so does society. The individual may want to gain prestige among his fellow human beings. Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Everything is okay. Everything is fine.
Something is wrong with my all of a sudden,
everything is perfect.
All of a sudden, the pictures is the way one. The individual may want to gain prestige among his fellow human beings. The same does the states and so bigger societies. We are proud to belong to a respected society, and we suffer if it does not stand the world's esteem, and we would like to change this. The state and the society in which we live is an extension in a way to our individual selves. What an individual desires is basically also the object of the objectives desired by community. The enjoyment of what a person aspired and acquired can only succeed to some extent in society. The relationship of the individual to society is a fundamental problem of all the humanity. The tension between the individual and the community, the tension between the goal and the individual, of the individual and the community as a whole exists all over in all other disciplines as well. For example, theology. Who is nearer to God, the pious hermit in the woods or the believing man in believing society? Ultimately, the importance and dignity of the hermit even derives only from the fact that he sets an example of faith for the community. So the common good and the meaning of life. The fact that human beings are mortal is a constant question about the meaning of everything we do. Every human society is ultimately a covenant of people to face the death. So we have to think, I skip this. The common good and self-interest as material conditions. Of course, the question of a meaningful life can be discussed on a philosophical and religious level. But in normal life, we are confronted with the normal daily questions, and we certainly cannot solve them alone, but only in community and cooperation with our fellow citizens in thinking globally with our fellow human beings, maybe on our fellow human beings on worldwide basis. So to speak, employment, salary, housing, job security, and so on. I think when we have been talking about education, we should also emphasize these topics, not talking about education in a general terms, but really focus to certain points which really bring us together and which only can be solved together. The free market system is sometimes suspected by some people of being only self-interested and not looking after the common good. I feel the opposite. I feel it cannot be denied that Western society in general and many private institutions and groups try to gain advantages over others not only by caring for themselves, but also for thinking of others. Group egoism is often denounced and often rightly so. But if we look at history, so we see that that contrary to popular opinion, We are living in a world of more global solidarity, and the Western countries are becoming more and more philanthropic, so to speak. When historians point out at our time, we will call, well, I think this is, I skip this. Situation after COVID-19 pandemic and conclusion. I said some things which everybody knows. Sometimes, however, it is important to express things that are taken for granted and to remind us of what it would be like if they suddenly not existed anymore. So the social textures, the social context in which we have been living and which have been interrupted by COVID to a very wide extent brings us back to the question, who are we in our own private lives, and who what did we lose by having been separated from each other during the Corona times and all these measures which have been brought together to fight COVID-19. So I feel if we try to find out what really brings us together, what mankind needs to live a meaningful life, this is shown to us in these Corona times, and it follows for future cases of regional and or even perhaps worldwide pandemics that we have to better prepare for precautions to ensure that people do not become strangers to one another. How these precautions can be designed and should be left to discussion. Maybe we have some ideas about this in our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you had opened many important questions. Before we start with a short discussion, I would like that all of you unmute your microphone and we go to the next speaker of our conference. That is Dr. Conrad Rickesh, and I would like to invite you to take the floor. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this possibility to express and exchange opinion about one of the most significant and one of the most dangerous as well issues of we experience during our life and probably in the modern history of humanity. Apart from similarities of COVID policy all over Europe, all over the great northern western hemisphere, so-called pandemic only increases divisions and differences, and I believe that that's the most important element of this process, because this pandemic politics rebuilt walls between nations and even between individuals, and hardly deepened the loneliness of human beings. So I would like to focus on some economical and social economical elements of the COVID period, which in my opinion should be related to almost forgotten old Marxist category, which was described by Friedrich Engels like social murder, sozialer Mord. And the elements of the politics during so-called pandemic are exactly how fulfilling this definition. Well, first, of course, I think we agree that it's too early to fully sum up the period of so-called COVID-19 pandemic. However, we already know today that the optimists who believe that this crisis would undermine capitalist legitimacy and restore class solidarity, national state power, and were absolutely wrong. On the contrary, global neoliberalism is even stronger thanks to the pandemic and has increased its profits. It has obtained it not only through exploitation, but directly through the social murder of working class and especially older retired people. The issue of the reproductive role of activities previously excluded from the analysis of the work-capital relationship gains additional importance in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. Critics agree that it's exposed many of the weaknesses of the capitalist system and the free market and the ineffectiveness of states objectified by capital. However, the conclusions and forecasts based on the 2020-2022 experience differ significantly. Only few authors, instead of foretelling the end of capitalism, misunderstanding perhaps the last great attempt intended to secure capitalism survival. And although it has been noticed, or more precisely overestimated, the breakdown of the capitalist supply chain, exposing the weaknesses of the care system subjected to financialization. But however, the detailed analysis show that the effects of the so-called pandemic in the socio-economic sense are distributed following the inequalities in the labor-capital relations, including the racial and gender factors as well. People of color are among the most vulnerable frontline workers who have been unable to benefit from home working protection and absenteeism wages. Global inequality also can only strengthen. Temporary suspension of part of the labor activity of northern societies, it's compensated by the hard work of exploited workers of the South to maintain the supply of goods. Especially in the United States, the few shields against COVID-19 have not covered the majority of Black people, Latinx, and indigenous, especially women, additionally bounded with the increased household costs, virtual learning, and so on. In the United Kingdom, when I used to live for several years under the name of key essential workers, simply conceal the sacrifice of the lives of the low wages ones, the modern proletariat, care home workers, sales assistants in supermarkets, cleaners, drivers, couriers, and many others. Very often retired people with disabilities and immigrants. With no proper access to the public health care, they were just sacrificed to make the COVID myth credible. In the UK, procedures are in place to deal with people over 80 who are in care homes. Yeah? In the case of positively tested COVID, nurses were not allowed to give them even a glass of water, not mention medicines or any other treatment. Well, it has been just announced that Queen Elizabeth II was positively tested on COVID, and everyone's wonder if the same procedures apply to her. How do you think? So it was a planned and organized genocide, only to improve the health of the British pension system. These deaths add up to the accumulation of the times of so-called pandemic. And these groups have been pushed even lower than previously. And meanwhile, the fortunes of the top 1% continue to grow all over the world. The workload of houseworks has increased dramatically, especially for women. And the periodic slowdown or even suspension of growth cannot be perceived as a permanent breakthrough, especially considering attempts to restore production and kin consumption unchanged. The so-called pandemic reminded that the policy of capital never hesitates from the social murder. And gigantic profits achieved by Amazon, Tonys, and others are obtained not only by increasing exploitation, but also directly risking the lives of workers. In turn, the situation of many transferred to home working should be considered as another example of extending the capital-labor relationships to activities previously unproductive. Work from home imperceptibly exceed the time frame of office hours. The value of labor is considered transferred towards capital, and the burden of the worker increases at the expense of other aspects of his life. The pandemic only accelerated and strengthened the tendency to housewifization of women. Social reproduction is financialized and marketized, but value of labor put in consequently excluded from the standard wage system. In fact, the person changed to Facebook or Netflix, which was an absolutely everyday life of so-called pandemic, unknowingly becomes an exploited workers of the great capital represented by these great corporations. In fact, we live and function in times when our pleasures have become addictive, and it becomes our work. And what is even worse, the work exploited. Yeah? Becoming aware of this is the first step to getting organized, and organized is the basis of resistance. Yeah? And of course, unfortunately, this resistance will be more and more difficult because, as George Agamben rightly supposes, alleged weakness of the states is in fact a screen for paradigm shift, but in the opposite direction than assumed by the wishful thinkers. Present state of exception would henceforth be a permanent formula, increasing inequalities. And since the neoliberal state appears only as an agent of capital, any potential strengthening of the government would not take place at the expense of the capital, but for its benefit. If something lasts 2 years, it has long been no longer an emergency on a transition period, but it's a new normality. The new normality of old capitalism, always with humans' blood on hands. What is the future? What is the possibilities of the future events? Well, the main trends of the modern economy work since decades is around zero growth idea. Whatever reaching its necessity forced by climate circumstance or considering as an objective result of exhausting the possibilities of capital accumulation, it's always this zero growth idea. However, it is also known that permanent growth is an inherent feature of capital. Yeah? So in fact, it does not matter much whether the world economy stops by itself or should be forced to it. The shocks is indispensable. A shock supposed to manage disruptions in the supply chain, which didn't want it to occur as fast as it was forecasted. It should deal with the weakening of demand, which also has not appeared on satisfactory degree. So must be caused intentionally by main market actors. But anyway, is the world of financial markets really false economy today, and production and services remain the real ones, or it's already opposite? Yeah, maybe a bit of that finance world is now real economics. Who knows? We'll see. We could imagine that maintaining the appearances of not completely globalized capitalism in the northwestern hemisphere seems to have lost its sense, the same like neoliberal democracy. Yeah? Sooner or later, we will be confronted with the problem of delaborization, anyway. The problem, what to do with people whose work is redundant in practice, at least in the present dimension. Until now, however, the consumption was needed, yeah? And we checked that people can be paid to refrain from work and where to get for it. By allocating a small percentage of capitalist rent obtained from the turnover of assets, considered optimal to keep it all going somehow without nominal development and growth. Characteristic changes known from the last 2 years, greater virtualization of remaining work, the almost complete digitization of money, and the mere increase in power of states, but only acting as actors of the capital, are just details to complete this picture of the new brave COVID world. And this is why COVID is the most important transformation of our times, a change at the level of essence of capitalism and civilization as such. And it is transition made jointly and inextricably with the use of energy instruments to maximize profits from the energy markets to obtain specific civilization effects, also measurable with some energy indicators. And as it happens with transformations, we cannot even imagine the final effect, but we already know that we are led to it, almost certainly, unfortunately, inevitably. I'm a pessimist, but as I mentioned before, the only way we can act, the only way we can protect ourselves is to work for consciousness, for self-awareness, because consciousness equals to organization, and organization is kind of resistance for itself. And I hope that we will be able to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Konrad. And before we go further, I will just give one short comment on your statement. On several conferences, I said that it seems to me that the COVID-19 was as a scanner who goes through all vertical and horizontal line in every society and has shown all weaknesses. and maybe we need ecology of conscience, but completely global ecology of conscience to rethink all models which we already have in hand, and maybe the majority of scientists just forget to read a little bit more Michel Foucault, Birth of Clinic from 1963, where he analyzed everything, and politicians and leading personalities in societies just nominally say, yes, bravo, that's fantastic, but nobody really take care about that till we have this situation. So before we continue with our conference, I would like now to invite our other three guests here, Ms. Ingmar Mantler, Dr. Ala Zajdel from Vienna, and Dr. Raptor, just shortly to give us a short comment, if you would like, on all this, what you had heard till now, and then we can go to this discussion. Please go ahead, Lady Ingmar.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Irmgard Mantler. I belong to Women Federation for World Peace. It's an NGO, and we work for education and humanitarian projects and also organize conferences. I think it's very important to make such a think tank to get in dialogue and discuss issues together, and to get to know different parts and different fields. But I think also the academia plays a very important role in the society, and especially also in education. But I think it's not only education about scientific education, but also internal education, character education. And we are not only a physical being, but also there is some spirit, we are spiritual being too. So, and that I think COVID is a time to reflect and to find out and what we can change in the future, or not only live like instead self-centered life, but also to learn how to care and share for others. So to change that there's some paradigm change, and I think we can destroy our society if we continue like this, but we can, if we can contribute in a positive way, we can change a lot. And I think religious leaders and political leaders, but also cultural, in different society, everybody can contribute and play a big role. So I appreciate this conference and listening to you, and also how to deal with other nations like Russia or China or Serbia. So to get to know each other and to find positive ways of solutions. Not that we have to fight against each other, but that we become one world family. The world became a global village, so we should become global citizen and find ways how we can help each other. Yeah. Thank you for being here, and thank you very much, and I appreciate to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lady Ingmar. I would like now to invite Dr. Zajdel. Please go ahead with short comment on all what we had heard till now.
Yeah, just short. Actually, I'm part of Dr. Elmar Kuhn's faith-based organizations in Vienna here. Also in my community, I'm like a co-pastor. No? And what I see here, it's easy for us to talk because we are Serbia, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, we have no tensions. Would be interesting if a Russian and a Ukrainian would be here. And also I see that as a co-pastor in our community, it's almost like a crime to mention God in such discussions here. Why not? Why? Yeah, it seems almost like. No? For example, Russians and Ukraine now, they're all Orthodox there. No? Maybe they try, but why couldn't they try to invite the Orthodox priests to talk to each other? They might ease the tension. And I would suggest what you do is very good. Any dialogue discussion is important for all left and right. And one of my daughters is secretary in Valneva. Valneva is like a Pfizer, AstraZeneca, like a new company growing, becoming popular. But in discussions like this, I would always write to a church or so, send us one of your representatives to talk with us. it's good to have a religious person participate, because it doesn't have to be a silent majority, but it's a silent, strong voice. A religious voice is, people basically are still religious, especially in Eastern Europe, let's say so. No? They cling more and when it's difficult. And we need this pastors and so representatives from churches also to participate more in these discussions. They are not that spaced out, just religious, but they also have their opinion, and they represent a silent, also a majority, not even my silent majority anymore. The religious influence could be more, should be more. I hope it will be more. Yeah, that's my thing.
Thank you, Dr. Zeidel. And now, Dr. Rator, please, if you have some comments on our discussion. Dr. Afsar Rator. If Dr. Rator is not with us right now, but I see he's connected. Anyhow, I would like now to invite you all next half an hour to discuss about everything what we had heard. And moderator of this discussion is Dr. Stephan Breu. So please, Stephan, take the floor and let's start with discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Zoran. Yes, so we had 4 very interesting speeches here. And I would ask to the speakers and to the floor if you have certain points you want maybe to discuss with one of the speakers or some ideas you want to follow. Yes, Dr. Aden was first and Mr. Reqas second. So please, Dr. Aden. You have to unmute, Sie müssen den Ton wieder einstellen.
Audio ein.
Now it's perfect.
Well, excuse me that I showed my finger first. I feel that I somehow missed the point of the conference, because I wanted to line out what brings us together and what pandemic really did to us to separate us. And I concentrated on this. Many entries of this conference seem to somehow deviate from this basic question: what did COVID-19 and all the governmental measures to defend this, to defend us against this pandemic, what did this us to our social texture? And I feel that I have to apologize to certain, to the group, that I may not have been too clear enough, that I wanted simply to show there has been a separation for us. We could not have been talking to each other. Some people were left to die alone and all this, and we could not learn, and we could not go to church, we could not go to theater, we could not pray with other people, just to bring take up a point which has already been made. So I feel I want to, well, in a way, I want to apologize that I may not have been clear enough in what I was saying.
Well, Dr. Aden, just let me say from my side, I think a lot of the other guests would also agree that you definitely don't have to apologize, because I think you exactly got to the point of the conference. I think, of course, the imminent situation that we have in these days in Europe with the danger of a war maybe has influenced some speakers also to take a wider access, mentioning the actual problems that we face today. And this might have shifted a little bit the focus of the conference also. But definitely, I think you have been very nicely going to the sense of the conference, and you pointed very strongly to the consequences of these government measurements. So from my side, I have to say no apologies. But we have to say thank you that you made your speech directly to the point of the topic today.
Stephen, Dr. Rator is now online. Please, can you give him the floor?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I'm driving because I got this invitation a little bit late, so I will not be able to open my camera. Nevertheless, I listened to the comments made, and it is really very interesting. The only comments are 2 or 3 I have it. Yes, I think we have to also involve ourselves more socially towards the vulnerables of the society, which are the people, as just previously mentioned, there are lonely people who are marginalized, people who have been left over. And second thing, which I'm just going in next week to Africa, and what my African friends and colleagues have been complaining, that they were also devastated by this corona pandemic. However, the readiness and the help and the assistance and the cooperation and collaboration with the Western world was very limited, and unfortunately they feel themselves as a second or third grade citizen of this global human society. I think this should also be very strongly addressed, that they are also as human as we are in the West, and they need also that kind of protection which has been not provided by the Western world to them. And that is one thing which really has to be highlighted in our next webinar or our conferences, because we are talking about the humanity, and humanity should not only be limited to the Western world. These people are as human as we are. So that should also be considering in this fact. Other than that, I also highlight the religious aspect of the conference, and also religious aspect of our humanity. Today we realize that 75 to 80% of all human race has a faith, and this faith should play a very strong relationship in our today's life. And a faith also teaches us about humanity, and we are again a big family if we consider that the fundamental of our humanity. And I think this emphasis should be again and again highlighted in all our discussion. This is only a small comment from my side, and I apologize that I did not prepare something, because I got this information only a few hours earlier, and I was really driving and so. But thank you very much for all the cooperation and all the people who were involved in that, and special my thanks go to Elmar, like always, and Arlo Seidel, and also the Deutsche Akademie and all those who were involved in that. A big applause to all of you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rator, you should not apologize. Everything is okay, because we succeed somehow in a very short period of time to organize everything. And now I'm connected directly. I was before, when we start preparation of the conference, I was in Switzerland. Now I am in Cambodia, in Southeast Asia. And I can just add one thing, Dr. Rator, the similar impression about the handling with this crisis in all aspects, I find out in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia. They have a feeling sometimes that nobody really think about them, and that nobody really try to help them to understand what's going on. And they are forcing actually many countries in the Western world for cooperation. This is in general. And what our dear academic from Germany, Dr. Menno, says, I agree with you. And I think that from the beginning of this crisis, world make several mistakes. One was word social distance, and the social distance immediately produced by individual some kind of fear. Instead of that, we should use maybe the word physical distance between two persons. But many mistakes world has done. But I'm still optimistic that we can find through brainstormings, through more individual activism. So we should not wait politicians or social or society structures to change some things. Maybe individuals should be much more active. And that is what I had write in a book, Preventive Diplomacy, before 20 years, because we should not wait anyone. The motor of social and political changes is always one individual person. And that is my personal comment, and sorry for interruption. And please, Dr. Stephan, go ahead with other elements of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoran. Yes, so Mr. Rickesh, well, I'm not sure if I speak, but my Polish is not so good.
Oh, perfect, absolutely perfect, don't worry. Well, just small remarks. Of course, I fully agree that there is no need for apologize, because absolutely very important aspect of the issue we working on is what we managed to kept during the pandemic. Not only what divided us, what separated us, what was strictly against some solidarity, but what we can saved from that time. That's so absolutely. And in the same time, I fully agree that we shouldn't think about the COVID policy and the COVID issue as a separate and closed being. It's all interconnected. COVID crisis, climate crisis policy, and war politics we can observe every day in mass media. As far as Ukrainian Donbas problem concerned, it's the same elements of the global transformation we should be aware of. So that's absolutely one thing. And second, what Dr. Seidel said about the crisis position, church position in this crisis, and not mentioning God. I think it's very important. It's very important voice of that, because it was very strongly visible during that time that someone would like people not to see transcendency of the experience they had. The element of religious was well excluded from the dispute as one of the first. Yeah, I live in UK, but I came from Poland for in my opinion, with Polish experience during pandemic time, it was very sad, but because one of the main institutions which had discredited itself, I had to say it very strongly, discredited itself, was the Catholic Church. I'm not a Catholic, I'm Orthodox, so for me it was, it's not a competition between faiths and religious. It was very sad experience, because yes, as you know, Catholic Church is the essence of the national identity of Polish people, and acceptance to have churches closed during the Easter time, acceptance of closing cemeteries during it's very important for Polish culture day for days for days and the whole Saints Day in November and so on. All this acceptance, all this blind signing every government decision about the COVID time was something which makes the church, especially Catholic Church, on the side of the others, not on the human side, not on the individual sides, not on the faithful sides, and that was very sad. Of course, it's not a question of faith, because the people return to God by themselves, just to find some kind of hope. But some institutions of the churches absolutely failed during that time, and it's very sad for us as a faithful. And I think understanding that the church and the religious is the essence of the all being of humanity, all and only target of our existence on Earth. So it's sad experience again, and I hope that maybe some reflection would be within the structure of the churches.
So thank you very much. Yes, sorry.
It's quite easy, Conrad Rickesh. That's absolutely what I've seen too. And I believe that especially the Catholic Church, but also the Iranian Church, missed totally its chances and tasks in this pandemic. And I don't know what to do with this, but what I've seen is the loss of faith to the churches, not the loss of faith to God, but the loss of faith and trust to the churches. And I think this makes it much more difficult to bring the churches and religions to talk with to talk one with the other if there is no trust from the people to the religions. And so I think especially Christianism in this pandemic has to relearn its social tasks for the people and for the international solidarity. And maybe it's now our task, and Mr. Seidel, I would appreciate also your comment. It's not only the pastors, it's a task of every baptized Christian to be loud in his speech for more democracy, for more social justice in our world. And this was what I mentioned in my speech, because we don't have to rethink what has been bad. We have to new think what could be better and what for chances can be, not only for Europe. It has to be always to be thought about what are the chances we can give to the rest of the world. We are dependent from the rest of the world by all our financial system and all our economic system, but mainly we have to understand that we are responsible for social cohesion in all of the world by the abilities we have. And the first necessity is not to bring vaccinations to all these people, because there we failed. The first thing is now to look forward and to bring education, because this is the main point to change society worldwide.
May I just add something to this?
Sure.
I think when we talk about religion and trust in people or trust in the churches, let us assume there is a God, and this God allowed this pandemic come to earth. And what did God want to tell us by this? This is an old Middle Age question. When there was a big catastrophe or a big pandemic or epidemic, what did God want us to tell us here? And I feel if we come to this question, we could try to find out, first to start with, we are not the masters of the world. We have to see what are we able to do, and where are our limits for doing so. And so I think in many aspects, and this has been said by some of the panelists already, in many aspects we have to rethink what we have been doing until now. So try to do a little bit less of everything, and let's consume a little bit less. Let's not travel so much. Let's not drink so much. Let's be more sociable to our neighbors, and let the pastors and the churches go to the people. Please, this is my preaching since the time when I was a church president. Do not just sit after your pulpit, but go to the people and tell them about what you expect them to do with their lives, and tell them what God might possibly have done to us and telling us by this pandemic.
Allow me first some short sentence. It's absolutely not my belief that my God is a cruel punisher of our world. I believe that not God is responsible for what is going wrong in this world. We are living in a world which is not ready for heaven, and it is not a paradise. But it's not the reason that God doesn't want to give us a fulfilled life. It's a problem that we are not able to challenge this life. And if we have a relationship to our God, then to a God who wants to strengthen us, to play a role for a better and a juster, more justice world. And I never believed that God will send illness and terror to the world for to guide us any way which I cannot understand.
Dear friends and colleagues, I think that we had opened many topics, many interesting points and many new thema, which of course we will follow on next hour webinars and Zoom conferences. And now I would like just to invite the president of Swiss Center for Global Trends, Dr. Stephan Breu, and president of Global Strategic Center from Serbia, so Dr. Stephan Breu and Dr. Dragana, to conclude this conference. And thank you very much for attention, and thank you that you all have been with us, and hope that we will continue all of this in the future. Please, Dr. Breu, and finally, Dr. Dragana.
Yes, so thank you very much, Dr. Vitorovic. Just let me give a short remark to Dr. Moderator. His opinion was very interesting, especially for me, because I'm preparing an article again on the impact of the measurements on children's right to education. And it's not only the children in Europe, especially the children of the less educated families that will suffer a lot from this pandemic, but especially in, like he was mentioning, in Africa or in Asia, like you said, or in South America. We have a lot of children that not only are suffering from loss of education, but that have really depended on getting nutrition in the schools, and that are really struck very hard by these countermeasurements. But it's another topic for a special conference, and I agree with Dr. Rator. It's not European focus, but if we know the pandemic it's a pandemic because it's in the whole world. Also, the effects are going beyond the border of the Europe. As a Swiss, I have to say Europe because we are not member of the European Union. So I want to thank everybody for their participation. It was very interesting. And I realized that all of you have a lot to say to other topics as well. So I hope sooner or later we will meet again on this platform and have some discussions on other topics that are concerning our life. Thank you very much. It was the first event. I'm very happy how we made it a success. And I want again say thank you to Dragana Trifkovic for her effort to initiate this platform, and we'll pass the word to her to close this first platform.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephan. It was my pleasure, and it's my pleasure to cooperate with you. I want to thank one more to all participants. I think it was very successful conference, and we will for sure continue. In the first step, I think we fulfill our goal, and it is to make the platform for discussion for all the people. So also I want to thank to Lady Irmgard because she said that we should invite the other peoples. So I will say this is a European platform because our think tanks are from Europe, but for sure we will invite in the future the other people from US, from China, from Russia, from Ukraine as well. And it is our goal to make people together and to discuss together, because I think as well the power is in us. So it is also a pleasure to hear, and because you mentioned the God, for me it's also important. So we will try in the future as well to invite the people from church to discuss with us. It is very important, and our plans are also connected with topics like religion, like security, like not every topic which is connected to people, to societies. So thank you very much. It was my pleasure, and I'm very happy because we organized this conference. We will continue to work. Please stay in touch and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, Dragana.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dragana.
Stephan. Very soon, all of this will be also on YouTube channel. So we will just continue, and this is, let's say, first impulse to that we change some things. When I prepared my first book on Balkan before 20 years about preventive diplomacy, that was under the subtitle, "This is just beginning." So I wish all of you excellent day, excellent night, and many, many warm greetings from Cambodia. See you.
Thanks, all the best.
Bye-bye. Goodbye.
Thank you.